All right, so in this video, I'm going to walk you guys through the entire process from creating maps using the data and production of the data to a point where we have an image. And I'm going to do that using the data we just received from Cook County Department of Human Services. So it's sitting under, I created a folder called External Partners under GIS, and Cook County sent us this file. It's effectively their hotline calls, and this is what original data looks like. This is I kind of lost a header at the top here, but these are zip codes in Cook County, and then these are the type of they categorize the calls, and then they kept track of it by month across across time from June until December, it seems. So we have we can kind of start to look at what this looks like by these categories, but I thought I'd start with mapping the grand total. Here, I already had done the work, but I had to reconfigure the data because GIS would not like this format of having each zip code in columns. So what I've done, so if you open up the other file in the folder, this is the one that I created, Cook County HHS, and I saved it as a CSV file, which is another important element. And it's nothing more than, it's very much like if you, I didn't do this exactly this way, but copy and paste in Excel. So when you paste the data, you have this option. If you right click or click on paste, paste special, there's this option called transpose. So what the transpose does is basically flip columns into rows and rows into columns, which is what we want. And that's how I ended up with this data. And then I kind of shortened the names. So in the original file, activities of daily living for 2021, in June of 2021, I simply DL underscore 0621. So there is DL 0721, which is right here. So that's July, and so on and so forth. So I wasn't really interested in doing this for month by month. So I kind of cut it and created this grand total, which is what we want. We want to be able to map this by zip code. So once I created this data, if you open up QGIS, I'm going to start with, remember, this is a zip code level data. So what we need to do is create, bring up a shape file for Cook County. And I found a zip code for the entire county and shape file. So sometimes you'll run into this where you're going to see two different shape files, and you know, determining which one to open, whichever is larger in file size is generally the right bet. So open this, add. Once you do that, I get this error message again. Press OK, and we have the zip code for the entire Cook County. I'm going to bring up that CSV file that I created at the limited text layer. So this is a way to bring in an Excel file, or in this case, an Excel file that was converted to CSV file. external partner, Cook County, and here. I am told you can actually use Excel file. I have not tried that, but let's see here. So I bring in the CSV file. So right click, let's kind of look at the data. This is what it looks like, the same data that I just created. Again, what we're interested in is grand total. Another thing I did is a zip code. I named it GeoID 10. Well, the reason for that is because if you go to the zip code file and look at the data, GeoID 10 is the zip code. So if you have that, go to properties. Now I'm gonna join this plus sign. Looks up the other file and GeoID under Cook County. Then it's gonna link to GeoID in this particular zip code, Cook County zip code shapefile. Notice again, the types are different. In CSV file, GeoID was read in as a numerical value, and GeoID in this particular shapefile is read in as a alphanumeric, so letters. However, they are QGIS is capable of matching it still. Let's go look at the data again. So the way you can tell, see if all these columns that start out with Cook County DHS at the top. And I just want to make sure there are some numbers here. So obviously not all zip codes are represented, but at least there are some here that I can tell that there are successfully linked. So I'm going to go back to property and go to symbology, graduated color scheme, and column, and I hope that the linked variables are a numerical value so we can map. And grand total is the one in interest. So I'm gonna use blue. Let's see what this looks like. So I'm gonna do the same thing as in other videos where I'm gonna get rid of borders. So here I highlighted all of them. So highlight at the top, shift key, highlight at the bottom, then you can select all of them. And then if you double, let's try that again. If you double click with all of them highlighted, I'm going to get rid of the borders here. And apply. So now it looks like this, which doesn't look like much. Add another layer. For most people, the zip code borders are not as meaningful as municipalities. So I'm going to add that. Again, I need to make the fill transparent. Simple fill, transparent. So now we have this border. I'm going to add Chicago community area on top as well, so that at least we have some distinction within the city. I do think, though, Chicago needs to stand out a little bit. So I'm going to do the fill transparent. However, I'm going to make the border lines a little different than the Cook County municipality border. So now we have Chicago. This is what Chicago looks like. And then you have community areas within, the 77 community areas within. Well, if you just kind of look at this, you can tell the distribution is largely geared towards Southern Cook. But here, I think it's probably worthwhile. So I'm going to go back and adjust these categories a little bit. So you can artificially do so. So I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to make those zip codes that didn't receive any calls to be one category of its own. And then make sort of artificial categories here. When it shows decimals, it's a little tricky. Let's see. I've actually done this before, and I kind of thought about these boundaries. I don't want you to think that this is something that I just created out of thin air. That I've had to try this a few times. So if we do something like this, we sort of have a cut points of our own. This seems somewhat reasonable to me. So let's look at this, because the idea here is that you want some distinctions, and as you can see, those area zip codes that have 0 do pop up, and then 0 to 50, again, kind of artificial distinction here, shows that there are some zip codes in the city that did have calls. So if you want to try this boundaries to be a little bit different, so let's try a little more granular. So let's say we want to try 0 to 25 calls, then maybe 25 to 100 calls. Yeah, so in fact, I think this may very well be even more meaningful in that you do have low volume that are kind of largely, interesting enough, I think either they are kind of contiguous up in the corner, northwestern corner, outlying areas of Cook County. And then this inner part seems to be where you have medium range calls here, what I would call first ring suburbs. And then the volume gets a little larger in pockets, but really we're talking about Southern Cook having a concentration of large volumes. I think that's the message here in terms of the call volumes for the county. It's really concentrated in Southern Cook, seems to be the message here. Now, so I'm gonna save this, the project. I'll just call it grand total. Now, something we haven't talked about before is if you go to project, you're gonna see what is called print layout. So this is where you're taking this image that you just created out of QGIS. And this is the beginning of the process. If you do new print layout, you're gonna get something like this. And here, this is basically transposing all the stuff, like the map. So I just selected add map. Then if you draw a rectangle, a map will pop up onto this page. And then you can do something like add legend. Obviously, legend's going to be a little messy looking, so I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. I'm going to make this map a little bit smaller so I can add the title. The way to do that is, so if you just create add label and create a rectangle, you'll see that this appears and it has the content in here already. Now you can edit what's in here by selecting this part. All right, so before we do that, let's fix the legend first. The way you do so, so everything can be fixed here, edited here using the interactive box here. So I'm struggling to bring those up, but you should be able to. So here, if you click on the title, if you right click, there's an option called item property. And item property is where you can edit the text. So you can change the title. I believe it was June of this year through December 2021. And then you can adjust the font and font sizes and all those things here. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna center it. I would like to make the font a little bit larger. If you go to font, you can increase the size. Okay, so that's a little bit of an edit. Now, if you go to legend, and this is an important one. Now, this auto update is checked. If you uncheck, you can actually edit the legend here, although what's in here won't change. But if you want to change the content in what's going to be exported, you can uncheck this auto update. Now, what I generally do is I just get rid of the ones that you're not showing. Here, now that I think about it, if I go back, I can actually change or rename some of these boundaries. Let's see, the orange ones are Cook County, City of Chicago community areas. The black boundaries are county municipalities. Okay, let's go back. Now those changes were now reflected because I started updating, so it's no longer linked. But if you go back and check it again, it will update. Now I'm gonna uncheck again and get rid of it. And then perhaps what I should have done, I'm gonna go back again. Not remove, I'm gonna rename it to the code. I go back to the printout for auto update. You should update, uncheck, get rid of it. Now we have a legend that's a little more reasonable. And then you can also adjust the fonts. I could never tell which is title, which is group, and what have. So you kind of have to play around with this a little bit. This legend doesn't have the title. I think the group will probably, let's see, subgroup. An item is probably the one that's going to reduce the font size. Yep. But here, if you just click on that, you could change it to the shape and hall appropriate fonts are also available. I think Seagull UI is the one that is a good alternative. You can even make it bold if you like. So on. Now, once you have this, so this is what you would put it in PowerPoint, or this is what you're gonna, this is the final product. So you would save this layout. It's important that you save that. This is different save mechanism than the project here. If once you save this, you can also export. I usually do an image. You can even do a PDF if you want to, but in terms of quality of the image, I think the JPEG is probably the best. Make this a little more detailed in terms of its label. Then it's going to ask you, as you click on save, it's going to ask you the resolution. I usually do something like 400. It doesn't have to be that high. So it's going to export. And if you go to, I believe I saved it under project files. So you have a JPEG file here. And this is the final product. So you could bring this, let's say you want to bring this image in PowerPoint as an example. So you can insert picture and then go to this image that was just created. And you have a PowerPoint slide here. So that's pretty much the entire phase from data management from the data file that we received to sort of reconfiguring the data and then creating the maps and then creating what is called a printout and then export the image so you can use it for your presentation purposes. So that's the entire phase. I'm hoping that we can start cranking out some maps now that we're starting to get some data from our